Hi guys, welcome back to the Book Brood. Today we are coming at you with our October wrap-up.
And we're probably going to go back to maybe just random wrap-ups that won't be on any kind of particular time schedule. So I'm just going to run through a few of them that I don't have copies of right now. Captain Marvel Volume 2 by Kelly Sue DeConnick. I rated that 4 stars. Birds of Prey Volume 1 End Run by Gail Simone. I rated that 5 stars. And then Birds of Prey New 52 Volume 2 Your Kiss Might Kill by Duane Swierczynski. I rated that one 4 stars. And then Supergirl Volume 1 Last Daughter of Krypton by Michael Green. I rated that 5 stars.
Awesome. Yeah, I don't have a lot of my stuff either. I took a bunch of it back to the library. But the first thing that I read this month was Dark Matter by Blake Crouch. And this was a 5-star read for me. This is a novel that starts with a man being kidnapped and injected with something, and then he wakes up and the person says, "Welcome back," and he's never seen this person before in his life. So it's, I feel like that's as much information as you should have, because I feel like a lot of people doing their reviews of it have been spoiling a huge part of it.
Alright, so I don't have Volume 1, but I do have Volume 2 right now of Eternal Sabbath. It's a manga. This one is by Fuyumi Soryo. Right there. I read Volume 1. It was okay. It's about this guy that can just kind of manipulate people to do whatever he wants them to, but occasionally there's people like this female character right here that it's a lot more difficult. He can kind of still do it, but they're much more resistant to it, and she's a scientist kind of discovering that there's people like this out there. I haven't picked up Volume 2, and I have Volume 3 also, so I don't know. It was okay. Yeah. I rated it 3 stars.
Just kind of in the middle,
yeah.
Meh. Alright, the second thing I read that I returned to the library already is Bird Box by Josh Malerman. And both Dark Matter and Bird Box were really, I was really anticipating them for several months, and I'm really glad I read them back to back. Not that they had anything to do with each other, except for the fact that they were both really, really good. I gave Bird Box 4 stars, and I thought after, mulling it over, I would up that rating, but I think it's a solid 4-star read. But it's about this world where something is outside, and if you see it, you go into, a homicidal rage, and you start killing everyone around you, and so everyone has to be blindfolded, and it's so interesting because so much of the book is written without relying on visual descriptors, and it's tense and scary, and I really enjoyed it.
Good read for October. All right, and then the next thing I read, our friend Amy got Volumes 1 and 2 of Year 4 of Injustice Gods Among Us. I read these ones. This was really good. It was a great improvement on Year 3. There's a great picture right here at the back. That's a wonderful section of the story there. I thought, I really enjoyed this one. I don't want to spoil it or anything, but the characters that needed some comeuppance kind of, got it a little bit, but, not as much as they should have still. They're still Year 5. I don't know how long they're going to be able to stretch this out. I hope it ends with Year 5, because it's just, they're just kind of running on fumes at this point.
The next thing I read was Interview with a Vampire, Claudia's Story. This was a graphic novel by Ashley Marie Witter. And I really wasn't in the mood for it, but I kind of forced myself to read it, and I think that affected my rating. I rated it 3 stars. I really liked the artwork in it, but I feel like I was done with the Interview with a Vampire story years ago, and I didn't really care about Claudia's story right now.
Then I read Kurt Vonnegut's Cat's Cradle. This is the second Kurt Vonnegut I've read. This is a story that is in present tense, but is told by the writer of the story itself, or the narrative. And it's really just kind of a cast of extremely flawed characters that just gives a very dry and humorous perspective on just the stupidity of humanity, I guess. I gave it 3 stars. Definitely not as you know, just gripping as Slaughterhouse-Five was, but definitely fun. So I wouldn't say it's required, but if you're a particular fan of Vonnegut, definitely check it out.
We have been flying through the Wayside School books with the kids. They've actually been loving them, and they're perfect for their ages. We've read 1,
Stories.
2, and I think this is 3.
I think so, yeah.
So the first 3, and we've all really enjoyed them. They're a perfect family read.
Yeah, they're hilarious, and by Louis Schaar.
Yes, sorry.
And then I read Isaac Asimov's The Caves of Steel. This is the 2nd book in the I, Robot series. I enjoyed this a lot more than I, Robot because it was one continuous story, and it really got more to the heart of what makes a person, really. And this was more the inspiration for the movie of I, Robot. But however, another example of how Hollywood can just take a great piece of literature and distill it down to the simplest trope possible. And just this was such a deeper story, very human story. I gave it 4 stars.
I finished the Torchkeeper series this month with book number 3, The Rising by Stephen Dos Santos. And I liked this trilogy. I think it was good. It was borderline, like in the last novel, it was trying to stretch it into something a little bit more. And I was a little worried, but I think it wrapped up okay. And I gave it a 3.5 star rating, which is a little lower than the first 2 because of that little bit of stretching. But that being said, I do hope to purchase and own this series at some point. I definitely want to reread it.
Cool. You didn't enjoy the first 2. You flew through them really quick.
Mm-hmm.
Were you trying to make the last one last a bit?
No, I have a really hard time finishing trilogies, I've noticed. And I don't think the last one was as solid as the first 2. I really don't.
Yeah, that happens sometimes.
Yeah.
All right. I finally read 2001: A Space Odyssey by Arthur C. Clarke. I actually finished this just today. This was really good. Clarke can just take science, and I was telling her and I was telling Amy about this. There's a small chapter in here that's just about a satellite picking up a signal, but he somehow makes it romantic even. And that just is a great way to sum this up. I did not like this as well as Childhood's End. It did have a great sense of just kind of fantastical events happening at the end. However, this one was just at a very more individual level than it was at the just overall human level that Childhood's End had at the end. So I gave this one 4 stars.
The next thing I read was Nailbiter, Volume 3, Blood in the Water. And this is by Joshua Williamson and art by Mike Henderson. And I freaking love this series. I think I've rated each of them 5 stars, but this was definitely my favorite out of the 3 so far. We're finally getting comfortable in the world, and it's less of... The first one drops you in, and you have no idea what's happening, and it's all crazy, and people are dying left and right. And the second one, you're starting to see the outline of the story, but in the third one, you're just very comfortable in this world, and it's gripping, and it's messed up, and I love it. And the basic premise for this is there is one town in Oregon, which is where we live, that has produced 16 serial killers, and they're trying to figure out why so many serial killers have come from this place, and it's really good.
I'll have to check that one out.
Yeah, I have to buy these at some point.
All right, and I read The Man in the High Castle by Philip K. Dick. This one was interesting, and Rachel from Colonnati read this recently too, and I was not finished with it when I watched her video of it.
Video was funny.
It's hilarious. But there were so many very interesting story threads and events that took place that either just went to unfulfilling ends or were just completely dropped and forgotten. And none of the characters were really all that interesting. None of them are memorable. And it had the audacity to imply possibly that this ends with one of the worst tropes possible in any kind of story. And I won't say what that is, but I was extremely disappointed in this book because it is just praised so much, I feel like, as just one of his best works. And I'm just like, this was terrible. It was so 2 stars on that one.
Wow. Speaking of Colonnati, I picked up Swords Point by Ellen Kushner on Rachel's recommendation. And I'm glad I read this. This is actually book 1 in a series. I didn't particularly care for this one, but I'm glad I read it. It is a world where swordsmen are hired to fight other swordsmen to settle noble disputes. And I think what this was lacking for me is there were no characters that I could get close to and like care about. It had those paragraphs where you could see from like 2 different people's perspective in the same paragraph, or like you were following, there was like no main character. You were following everybody, and at some points it got a little confusing because in the first part of it you think it's about the swordsman, and then you finally realize, oh no, this is about political intrigue and the interweaving of everyone's stories in a really complex way. I didn't particularly care for the ending. I think it was well done for what it was, but I'm not sure. So I'm not going to be continuing on in this, but I did give it 3.5 stars. I think it was well done. It just wasn't my kind of story.
And then my favorite of what I read this month is The Shadow of the Torturer by Gene Wolfe. This is a really interesting story about a boy who was essentially raised in this guild of torturers, executioners. They get their members from just the orphans of war. And so it's the only world he has ever known, and he's kind of forced on this adventure, and he struggles with feeling a love for the guild, but also not agreeing with it at many times. And the world is very interesting itself. It's a science fantasy, so it's actually Earth in a decline from an age of technology. So there's still these bits of technology, and it's referenced that there's people that do come from the stars still, but Earth has lost that ability of that kind of flight, is what they call it. And
that is my favorite genre of all time. I might have to read that.
It was done very, very well. I think Patrick Rothfuss got a lot of inspiration for the Name of the Wind series from this. I liked this character much better than Quoth, though. His flaws were much more illustrated and just made a far better narrator, I felt like, too. This is a fun story, and really the only criticism I have for it, for a short book, it could get long-winded at times. There's a part where they're going through some gardens, and it just felt like it just drug on and on and on, and it was like, okay, let's move on. But I gave it 4 stars, and this is the first in a 4-part series. The other 4 parts aren't on the list, so they're going to have to wait, but I will definitely get to it eventually.
Very
all right.
Cool.
And
that's everything for me.
Our wrap up there.
And let us know what your favorite thing was that you read this month, and we will see you next time.
Bye, guys.